Good afternoon, everyone. This is Steven Hernandez again for Steven Hernandez's Nonprofit Fundamentals. This is going to be another relationship video. And I want to say off the top that this video was inspired by Actual Black Mermaid. We had a wonderful conversation recently, and this video is directly a response to that. The subject is going to be entitlement. Entitlement in terms of relationship. It's going to take the form of a story. As I upload the video and get more information for you all, I will make sure I provide links to her channel and some of the work that she does in the description. So as I said, this particular video is going to be about entitlement. And what I mean by that is the feeling, the idea that people have and the assumptions that they have with regards to relationships. So this is going to take, again, this is another one, our story times is 1000% true. Like, you can't make this stuff up. And I'm going to use this to illustrate a common thing that I see with the singles and even the couples that I work with. And I want to say on the top that after you hear the story, which is kind of funny, which is kind of shocking, and you're going to shake your head and say, well, that will never happen to me, or like, that's an extreme example. Of course it is. That is why I use this, kind of like somewhat goofy story to illustrate a point. But I use these stories to illustrate these points because it's a lot more common than you think. And it is a very real problem, which we're going to address right now. So again, just a little bit more backstory about me. When this would have been probably 2006 or 2007, I think 2007, so more than a decade ago, when I was doing marriage and relationship work full time. One of the really interesting opportunities that I had was to do marriage and relationship work, specifically communication and conflict resolution work with some inmates at a federal prison. It was a very nice federal prison too, I must say. And we got there, myself and my partner, and it was always a male and a female who did the class together. When we would work with the inmates, and all of them were part of what I believe was called the RDAP program. So they were all former drug dealers, former addicts. Primarily, pretty much everyone had been involved with the drug trade in some form or fashion. And we got to them after they had been through 8 or 10 weeks of really intensive group therapy. So in some ways, they were the most open and honest clients I ever worked with. And so you would have these huge, like, muscular dudes, like, all tatted up, like, scarred faces. And they could really, like, genuinely talk about, like, their issues with their father, their feelings of abandonment, recognizing the trigger issues that they had. So it was kind of just jarring sometimes to hear them talk about their true issues in a way that many of my clients that I deal with right now are just really just not able to do. Like, they can't emotionally go there in the way that a lot of my prison clients could. And so I always like to use a lot of the examples that they gave me because it was just so raw and real. So anyways, so at the end of their 8 to 10 weeks of group therapy, then myself and my partner would be brought in, and we would kind of come alongside the other work that they were doing because all of them were going to be released soon. Why were we there, you may ask? The prison system recognized that recidivism, horrible problem, very expensive, causes all kinds of problems to society at large and to the individual in particular, often stemmed from someone being released, coming back home, having issues trying to adjust back home. Perhaps, their child, which was maybe a baby when they were incarcerated, is now like an angry teenager, and them not being able to deal with that. Perhaps their spouse or their partner, has done something that has offended them, what have you. Like a lot of relationship or family drama, if you will, would cause a relapse in terms of anger or, like abusive behavior, or more often addictive behavior. They would have a bad fight, they would go out and they would get drunk, or they would start using controlled substances again. It would cause a cycle of bad behavior, and then they would wind right back up in the criminal life and or incarcerated again. So myself and the organization I was part of, and my partner, we were there to provide them, again, some basic conflict resolution, communication issues, and some other general marriage and relationship skills. It should not surprise you that many of the men that I worked with came from broken homes, never knew their fathers, never saw a healthy relationship, never believed in the idea of a healthy relationship. So after one of our cycles, so the guys were going to be released, I believe, in a few weeks after they were done with us, this man came up to me. It was at the end of our program, the last session I was going to be there for. So the last time I was going to see this guy. And this man who's probably in his mid-40s, late 40s. So he was he was not a young man anymore, but certainly not old. He came up to me, and he wanted to tell me, first he thanked me for everything we had done. He was very, pleased with the program, felt that he had learned a lot. And he related the story, which I'm about to relate to you. And he said, you know what, I'm lucky. I'm so lucky compared to a lot of these other guys. I have a good wife. I have a good woman waiting for me. And as you do in this work, you kind of let people talk. You want to hear what they have to say. And he went on to say, again, I'm so lucky. I have a wonderful partner waiting for me at home. My wife is the only one who stood by me. He went on to say how, all of his ride or die homeboys, the guys who were in part of his gang, friends of his since, he was his earliest childhood, how they had, they had fled when he was arrested. They had turned on him. They wouldn't answer his phone calls. Some of them had testified against him, and none of these ride or die homeboys, as he said, none of them were there for him when he was arrested, when he was arraigned, when he was sentenced, when he was incarcerated. None of them came to see him. He felt abandoned by them. And he said the only person, the one person who really stood by me was my wife. Now, what made this man unusual, unlike a lot of the other guys in our group, was that he had been a barber. He was a very successful barber. He was very skilled at it, and he owned, I think, 3 or 4 very successful barber shops, which were like the legitimate front for his drug business. So he had marketable skills. He had economic resources that he knew he had kind of still waiting for him because, in his words, his wife had really stepped up. I believe he had transferred the assets into her name or something like that. She had taken over the businesses, and she had been able to maintain at least 2, maybe even 3 of them, and really preserved a great deal of his wealth, had kept his businesses going, had, again, quoting him now, she took care of all my kids. She took care of his children that were not hers, that they were born out of his multiple affairs. So I think there was at least 1, maybe 2 illegitimate children that she raised in her own home, that she took care of for him. And he just went on, just laying on the praise for her. She was such a great woman, so loyal. She really held things down. I'm such a lucky guy. But then, and here's the kicker, right? And this is where the entitlement comes in. So this is everything leading to this. He leans in, kind of shyly, lowers his voice a little bit. And he's like, Steve, here's the problem, though. He says just like this, he's embarrassed about it, feels kind of ashamed about what he's about to say. And I'm like, oh man, what is this? What's the deep, dark secret that she must be hiding? Right? That was where my mind was going. And he leans into me. He's like, I'm just worried because she's put on some weight, and I'm not sure if I can be faithful to her. And when you hear something just like that asinine, you as a marriage relationship expert, you kind of just rock back on your heels. But you don't want to completely shut someone down when they're being honest, even though it's a horribly entitled and insulting thing to say. But I kind of threw it back at him. I'm like, what? You just told me. She held everything down. She was so loyal to you. You have something to go back to because of her. She stood by you. She took care of your wealth, your children, your other children. That's what you're concerned about? And he's wringing his hands. He's like, I know that sounds really shallow, but I can't stop thinking about it. She's putting on about 15 pounds. And that might be a deal breaker for me. That was his phrase. He used the phrase deal breaker. Now, never mind the fact that this man had been incarcerated for 20 years. So in 20 years, she put on 15 pounds, which is, crazy. She'd done all these things. He had been incarcerated for serious crimes. He was taken away. He was out of the family life. He wasn't providing for his family. She took on all these enormous burdens for him. And his concern coming out was that she had put on a little bit of weight, and he was not sure that he would be attracted to her anymore. Now, here's where I want to get into in terms of this term entitlement. Really think about that. Really think about how messed up that is, how entitled that is, that she had done all these amazing things, She had stood by him when many people, by his own acknowledgement, did not, could not, would not stand by him. And his concern was his attraction to her, that it might not be there anymore. So just a couple things I wanted to point out there for you to think about. As I said, he was, at the top of the video, he was probably in his mid to late 40s. One of the things that the other therapists who work with them, the people who work with them very closely, said that I never have forgotten, is that when these guys are incarcerated, especially if they started using, they mentally never progress beyond where they were when they started using or when they really got into that lifestyle. So despite the fact that this man was, close to 50, mentally, he never really advanced his thinking in terms of relationship. He never had a mature outlook on what a relationship is. Despite all things he had accomplished in his life, and he was a grown man now, for him, the be-all, end-all of a relationship between a man and a woman was, I need to be sexually attracted to her, or I can't be faithful to her. That really was kind of like it for him. So again, that just illustrates a very immature way to think about relationships. The second thing was, again, the entitlement. It was all about him. And I threw it back at him. I'm like, is that all you can think about? Like, what about her? What's the minimum that you can do to show your gratitude for what she's done for you? And he paused and he thought for a long time. He's like, well, I guess I won't bring it up to her right away. That would be kind of rude. And again, you have to laugh because it's just so crazy, right? And it's not funny, but you have to laugh or else you'd cry. And again, I'm like, do you hear yourself? What you're concerned about is something that is not that big of a deal. She did all these things. Think of the things you could not do because you were incarcerated, because of the choices that you made. Are there other things that you can do for her to show your gratitude? Because you've told me in this class and other times that you really want to make this relationship work. You want to start fresh. You want to show her that you're a new man, etc., etc. I would hear a lot of things like that, and that's a whole other video in prison. And so, it was troubling because it was still something where he just couldn't grasp that there were other needs, that the people that were around him, his partner, his wife, had thoughts of her own, had feelings of her own that didn't begin and end with him. That's why I was talking about with regards to entitlement. And again, I want to circle back to this point right here. You may brush this off like, well, that guy was incarcerated, that's crazy. People are not like that in real life. Are you sure? Think about that. In the comments below, I really want to think about that. I want you to think about that. Have you seen entitled behavior? Have you acted entitled in relationships? What does that phrase mean to you? I'm pretty sure everyone would agree that this guy was really out of line. But how often do we accept that behavior in our own lives, among our friends, among our workmates, amongst our relationships? I hope this story time was interesting to you, 100% true story. Thank you so much, Actual Black Mermaid, for inspiring me to do this video. Like I said, I'll provide information about her website, her services in the description in the days to come. Thank you all again. I hope this video was of interest. If it was, please subscribe, share this video. I have a whole other series of relationship videos, more to come in the days ahead. Thank you as always for watching, and my name is Steven Hernandez, and this has been Steven Hernandez's Nonprofit Fundamentals. Thank you so much, and take care.